Joining us is Jeremy Rosenthal, trial attorney and founding partner of Rosenthal, Calabas, and Therian. Jeremy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Get us started here. Does Trump have the authority to actually do all of this?
I don't believe so. What he's trying to do is essentially overrule a constitutional amendment through an executive order. The way the Constitution works is you've got several articles which give the government very broad and sweeping powers. Then we have the Bill of Rights, or the amendments to the Constitution, which for the most part limit the government's rights. But the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Executive orders sort of operate in the abstract, if you will. He can say things like, I'm making an executive order that all the national map makers in the country from now on call the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America. He can do something like that, but he can't unilaterally change a constitutional provision. So all these attorneys general, what they're doing is they're suing to enjoin or stop this from going into effect, and they're going to do their best to shut this executive order down.
Well, Trump's team is arguing, we just heard there, that the Constitution means that anyone born to people here legally can get citizenship. Is that a valid argument at all, do you think?
It's a hard one to make because the Constitution doesn't say that. You just read it. I'm looking at it right now. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. If you meet those qualifications, you are a U.S. citizen by the supreme law of the land. If there's a part that they're going to hitch their wagon to here, it's going to be or subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But anybody who is anywhere in the United States that commits any kind of a crime still gets prosecuted. They're absolutely subject to our jurisdiction. Now, maybe somebody at an embassy might not be, or something to that effect. But I think it's a very creative and a very difficult argument to make. We'll see what they come up with. But I think of all the executive orders that he signed the other day, I think this one may catch the most flack and may get challenged, and it may very well be a successful challenge to it.
Right. And so with these lawsuits all now being filed, what happens next? I mean, can the order still go into effect in the next 30 days as he originally planned?
What's going to happen is with all of these orders, they're asking for what's called injunctive relief, which means that they would have to show the U.S. Supreme Court a likelihood of success on the merits. If that happens, the U.S. Supreme Court will pause this going into effect, even though it's already, I guess, paused until February 19th. It would pause that date or abate it indefinitely until the Supreme Court could actually make an overall ruling on the case. That's what I would expect to see. I think about a week ago, we were talking about the same issue with TikTok. TikTok was asking for that law to be enjoined, to be frozen, so that something could happen and the court could rule on it. But the U.S. Supreme Court said, you didn't show us a likelihood of success on the merits. We think you're going to lose this overall, so we're not going to pause this law. It's not final, but I would think that I think it's pretty likely that the U.S. Supreme Court abates this executive order from going into effect on February the 19th.
Jeremy, that's a great explanation there. Now, I want to take it hypothetically for a moment, right? If the order were still to move forward, then according to Trump, kids whose fathers aren't citizens or are here as lawful permanent residents and whose mothers are here either temporarily or illegally would not be getting any passports anymore. What happens to these kids after that?
We're operating in a void. We simply don't know. If the law was that they're no longer U.S. citizens, then these are in all likelihood people who never questioned their citizenship. Would they be allowed to ask for naturalization? Would they be allowed to apply for naturalization? Would criminal histories in their past exclude some of them? It would be really, really messy.
And so from a constitutional rights point of view, what kind of a precedent does Trump's executive order set here?
He's doing what a lot of presidents do. Let's look back and remember some of the history behind executive orders. The Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves in 1863, was an executive order. And President Lincoln said as much. He said, I don't know if this will work. I don't know if this legally does the trick. To guarantee that it works, we have to pass a constitutional amendment. But look, if the president is right, if he's correct and he does an executive order and the Supreme Court agrees with him, then it potentially does set a precedent for a president to or the executive to take an aggressive stance towards constitutional issues and say, well, I order this or I order that. And another thing that the Supreme Court could also say is, well, even if this is correct, an executive order might not be the right mechanism for this. It could be Congress that's acting, right? When we look back at the TikTok example again, that was a congressional act, not the U.S. Constitution. So executive orders, like I said, they sort of operate in this void that is, well, Congress isn't doing this and the Constitution doesn't say that. So an executive order is somewhere in the middle. So it can be very, very confusing. But again, and if we think about it like this, and not to talk about the political implications of this, Donald Trump is doing what he believes he was elected to do, and that is to satisfy his constituents. And it may be that he knows that this thing wasn't going to work, but it's worth a try, and that if he's going to pass or try to execute over 100 executive orders, and he may give the court a few that he knows are going to get stricken down because maybe there's others that he would rather get through. Don't know what his strategy or thinking is here, but again, very complicated stuff.
I think only time will tell what his strategy is here. Jeremy, last question for you here. Trump signed this order, right, in this bid to try and address this issue of him saying, some illegal immigrants are trying to get their foot in the door to stay in the U.S. through having children here. Do you think there's a better way to address this issue?
I think there's a much cleaner way to do that if that's your objective. There could be legislation. In fact, it's difficult. I do not believe that if you have a child here, but you are not a U.S. citizen and your child's a citizen, in those instances, I don't believe that the parent can apply for citizenship until they're 21. But that's the fix here. The fix could be some type of immigration legislation that just says, look, if you are here and just because you have a child who's a citizen doesn't automatically make you a citizen, or you make amendments to that part of it, that would be far easier. Again, you are trying to get around what looks like some very clear-cut language in the U.S. Constitution, and language that has really not been challenged for over a year, over 125 years. So you're really facing an uphill climb if that's your way of going about this.
Absolutely. We definitely are in uncharted territory here. Jeremy Rosenthal, trial attorney and founding partner of Rosenthal, Calabas, and Therian. Thank you for your insights today.
Have a great day.